This entire discussion is about being more intentional with how you live your life. And if you're walking around saying, I should do this, I should do that, you're creating a negative judgment about yourself.
Hey, Launch family, before today's episode, I have a small favor to ask you. We realize not everyone who's watching our show is subscribed to the channel. So if you've ever learned anything valuable from our conversations, or if you felt inspired by one of our guests, can you do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button? It helps grow the show more than you know. And the bigger the show gets, the bigger our guests will get. Thank you. And here's today's Dare to Launch. What are the things people are not thinking about when it comes to their intentional, regular routines? You know, are there traps or holes or things like that people just don't think about when they're creating these routines?
To me, it's the trap of should. And it's that thought of, I should do this. And it's not the thought of, I am going to do this. It's not the thought of, I want to do this. It's not, I have a goal to do this. It's a thought of, I should do this. And it's such a small thing. But I think when you say to yourself, you know, I should do something, then it becomes an obligation. And it becomes something that it's either something that you're doing out of obligation, but you're going to be not as committed, or it's something that I've added something to my to-do list. You know, it becomes an obligation. It becomes something that you're doing because you should do it. And I think that sucks a lot of the benefit out of it, because now it's no longer something that you get to do. It's something that you're excited to do. It's something that you're doing for a purpose. It's something you're doing because it's like, well, I should be doing this. And on the other hand, it becomes something that's easy to put off. But it's something that it's something that if you do miss it and you do put it off, then it's still this constant, like it's, going back to what you were saying, Chris, like start your day with a win. Like what a way to start your day with a loss, right? Is by saying, I should do this. But then if you wake up a little late and then, I got to respond to this message right away because my boss says it's super urgent, or, oh man, this client like needs something, or, oh man, something's falling apart, or like whatever. Then it's immediately a missed item, right? So like you hear the way that Jeff talks about his morning routines, it's never a should, And so I think it's a small distinction, but to me I think that the word should is just something that is a do not use word for me personally when talking about things that goals I have, or things that I want to accomplish, or things I want to add into my life.
Should meditate versus, I get to meditate this morning is a very big distinction in like that how the energy is about doing that thing, right? I think that's a huge distinction. And I've seen that before when I'm nervous about anything too. I'll be like, instead of being nervous about it, it's like performance or getting on a show or doing something where, you might have to give a speech and it's kind of nerve wracking. Instead of saying I have to do or should have, it's like, I get to do this. It changes the energy towards excitement as opposed to nervousness. And it really does shift whether or not that thing gets done, I think.
And I think it's important too that language works for you. Like for you, that's a thought. I could see somebody having something that's a should, but then they try to reframe it, but it still feels like it's an obligation. It's finding a thing that works for you. Like for me, it's either like I want to do this, and then it's okay, that's something that happens if time allows. That's a goal, but it's not a requirement. Or the other way is I will do this. It becomes a non-negotiable. It becomes like something that has to happen no matter what. Like if I'm worried that maybe I might wake up at 7 a.m. and I have something I have to get immediately responded to, but what I'm doing is I'm going to hit the gym in the morning for an hour. Well, then, okay, cool. Then what do you do? Well, okay, you wake up at 6, you wake up an hour earlier and you set that time card, So to me, it's either making something that it either becomes a benefit, like a bonus if you get to do it, or it's a non-negotiable. But the in-between there land, at least for me, gets to be an unhappy sort of place.
I think what Dan just spoke to is absolutely huge. The phrase I've heard is stop shoulding on yourself.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
I haven't heard that one before, but I like it.
Yes, just stop shoulding. I don't ever want to use that word. I just don't ever want to use that word in the context of something that I intend to do or I want to do. I think that this thought underlies this entire discussion. This entire discussion is about being more intentional. Being more intentional with how you live your life. And if you're walking around saying, I should do this, I should do that, you're creating a negative judgment about yourself. A word I use, if there's something that like would be nice for me to do that I'm thinking that'd be cool if I could do that, is I'll say, I aspire. I aspire to like do this. I aspire to do that. But it's aspirational. It'd be nice if I did, but oh my gosh, I hate that. It's analogous to me to like the idea of resolutions, New Year's resolutions. And that's like, I resolve to do this thing. I don't like that energy. So yeah, just stop shooting on yourself.
Well, it also seems to put something outside of you, right? Like I find that tangible change happens when we change our identity, not so much when we change how, like what we say about, so like, oh, I should be someone who works out in the morning. What versus I am a person who is healthy and works out in the morning, right? Like the identity is where we create lasting change. And that's where the willpower thing, I find it doesn't get used up as much when you have it as part of your identity versus it's something I have to be doing or I should be doing every morning because I've decided, to start a business or decided to be healthy, whatever that.
Or someone on Instagram said you should do this.
Yes, I read it on a carousel one time, so I should definitely be doing that. And those are the easy things to look at and say, oh yeah, I should do that. So I'm just going to try. But until you really embody it as like, this is who I am now, who I'm becoming, I guess, it does. I don't find that creates lasting change for many people unless you embody it.
Agree. I think habits are what create lasting change. And that's what we're talking about with this whole discussion, whether it's morning routine, evening routine, whatever, about being more intentional. It's creating habits because we're good at habits. And why not create good habits? I'll tell you a habit. I love coffee. We were talking about coffee earlier. I love coffee. I like, one of my favorite things about my body is I wake up every morning, I've got a new coffee allowance that my body allows me to have more coffee. And then I have coffee until like Dan was talking about, I probably shouldn't have anymore. So I love that. I love every morning waking up with a new coffee allowance, but it's relatively new. I've only been drinking coffee for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years. Spent my life as a tea drinker before that. Then I switched over to coffee. But when I switched over to coffee, I looked at it, it's like, okay, I'm going to take on this habit. And I decided at that point that if I'm going to take that habit on, I didn't want that habit to have any calories. So I decided I was going to drink black coffee. Now, I think black coffee is the answer, that we should drink black coffee. But I decided I was going to drink black coffee. I didn't want to take on calories. And I also didn't want to take on caffeine. And I didn't want to create that dependency on caffeine. So I said, if I'm going to take this habit on, it's going to be black coffee and it's going to be decaf. And newsflash to all the skeptics out there, you actually can have really, really good decaf coffee. It exists. You just have to seek it out. So that's just this idea of being intentional with a habit.
That's super funny. I actually had a very similar introduction to coffee where I did not care. I didn't really like coffee. And it was not till I was probably, I think I was like probably 24, probably like 23, 24, something like that. And I literally decided like, I'm going to start drinking coffee. And it wasn't something that I liked. But what I did like was energy drinks. And I liked Red Bull and I liked Rockstar and I liked Monster. And I would be drinking one pretty much every day, which like, I don't know, I didn't notice any negative effects from it and stuff. Like, I don't know, I was 23. But at the same time, I was like, all right, this is probably not like super good. This is a lot of sugar. And I was like, a lot of people really love coffee. Like, kind of a lot of people really like coffee. And it seems to be one of those things that can be a bit of an acquired taste. And so I'm just going to be like, cool, I'm just going to decide that I'm going to like coffee and then go and like coffee. But it was the same sort of thing. It was like, yeah, I was going to just drink black coffee because it was like, okay, well, the goal is to not be drinking a whole bunch of sugar each day. So if I drank a bunch of coffee, a bunch of sugar each day, then it would just be the exact same thing, right? And the funny thing was it was only like a week. And then I was like, all right, cool. Yeah, this is good. I like this. And now I really like coffee. I've been drinking coffee for quite a while now.
Yeah, I love coffee too, but I started on mochas. I started I was like, it was, I guess, the equivalent of those like energy drink things that you were doing, like high sugar. You know what's great in the morning? A bunch of fat, sugar, and cream, and all that stuff right there, and shoot
Chocolate,
that
yeah.
back. And I would do that, have a breakfast sandwich in the morning, and then rock all day. Like that was me in my 20s, and yeah, it was right around a time I was working with a coach, and I wasn't super happy with where my waistline was and how I was feeling and all those other things. So I looked at my diet, and there were 2 things I needed to cut out. And I made a commitment for 1 year. I'm going to have absolutely no mochas, because that was one thing that was definitely not serving me at that level. And the other was this frozen pizza that I was eating way too much, called Delicio. They're gone out of business now, I think, because I stopped buying them. But there was literally so many of these I was eating a week. And so I will say, like, that one choice that I made for a year, I've never gone back. Like, yeah, transitioned into having coffee and other things that serve me, black coffee, I should say, without any of the extras. But man, you make those commitments where you can just maybe shave away some of the things that don't serve you in the morning. It doesn't always have to be adding things to your routine. Sometimes it's just changing or shifting a few things that will empower or bring something bigger for your day than it was before.
Chris, you started a few minutes ago asking about what do people get wrong, and I think a lot, Dan spoke to the should, and you just spoke to something that I thought was really important. You said, I'm going to try this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this commitment. I'm going to try this for a year. And I think that can be super powerful. Like, one of the things I wrote down that I wanted to talk about that people mess up is that you do have a review. And when I first learned about doing the morning routine, again, I mentioned it was from my friend Eben Pagan, and he said, I'll review this once a month, which isn't a big, like, huge thing. It's just like every month I'm going to sit down and say, well, do I want to change anything? And so I think that, you're not going to create a solution forevermore for every situation. But what we're talking about is being intentional and creating the day that you want, and that day will create the week, and the week will create the month, and the month will create the year, and the year will create the lifetime. So you heard Dan talk about taking on a new habit. You heard Chris talk about taking on a new habit, eliminating stuff from his life and saying, I'm going to do this for a year. You could say, I'll do it for a year. Or you could say, I'm going to do it for 30 days. I think 30 days is probably the minimum to try. There's all kinds of research on how long you have to do something to create a habit. And I think a lot of that stuff is misquoted, and there's a lot of disagreements. But I think 30 days is a good number. I'm going to try this thing for 30 days. And then I think going back and reviewing after those 30 days is super powerful. And then, Chris, I got one other really important thing that I think people really mess up. And I think that most people don't even know they're messing this up. You want to know that one?
I do. What is this thing people are often messing up with their daily routines?
Yeah, it's all about the transitions. And it's a transition from one thing to the next in your routine, or it's a transition from, if we're talking a morning routine, waking up to actually starting that routine. And so I mentioned, for me, it's hydration, but then it, like, right next to my water, which I put out the night before. So the morning routine actually starts the night before. So I fill up a half a gallon glass jar of water, and I know I'm going to go through one and a half of those a day. So I'll fill that up. It's on my counter. Sitting next to that on the counter is my phone, because I'm going to take my phone and I'm going to walk over for my meditation. So first, that water's all set up. I pour into a glass, drink the glass. Then the transition to the meditation is all set up, because that phone is right there, and I know where I'm going to go sit and how I'm going to be in my meditation. And then, actually, Chris, I didn't mention this to you, but now another thing I've added to the morning routine is, right after the meditation, I'll play a little bit of guitar, just to myself, just noodling around. It might be 5 minutes, it might be 15 minutes, but it's just, it's such an amazing thing to do after that meditation. It puts me in I can just feel the vibration of the guitar. It's just, I love it. But the guitar is sitting there right next to where I'm going to be in my meditation. So I've thought through all the transitions from one activity to another. And so I think transitions are where our lives are lost. That's where we end up picking up our phone and we open up social, or we look at our email, or we look at our texts, And it's so easy to get distracted in the transitions, and all of a sudden it's an hour later. So really, if part of your routine is going to the gym or working out, I mean, knowing exactly where your shoes are, where your workout clothes are, where everything is, everything you can do to smooth those transitions. And those are the type of things you can work on later in the day when it's not about the willpower. It's about just setting those things up. It's about becoming inevitable. It's about creating a situation so that you go through the important things of your life without expending any willpower.
The inevitability of your day. That's a powerful way to think about it. Obviously, have proximity is one of the powers that you're using there, is by putting the things in your routine close by so they're easily accessible. Are there other things I'm thinking about, like how do you do that and then transition into some work, for example? Or are there ways that you use that to create inevitability towards that productivity you need to do for the business?
Well, Dan talked about that earlier, about this idea of planning each evening. He's planning what is the most important thing to do the next day, and so I think that's a huge part, is getting intentional throughout every area, including moving into what are the projects you need to work on. What's going to move the needle? What's the most important thing?
How many do you think about in terms of that? Because what we're talking about is priorities, right? Like, okay, it's, Monday night, tomorrow I'm going to go into Tuesday. I'm thinking about my priorities. And when I do this, I've read a book called The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. And the very first chapter of that is on, CEO level time management. And he says, pick 7 things that are your crucial, needle movers. And, the next day you start with number 1 being the highest priority. And then you kind of go through that until you reach all 7. Or, if that doesn't happen, you move the next one to the next day. How do you think about that? Is it like 1 thing, 2 things, 5 things, 7? Is 7 the right number?
I think the danger that happens, honestly, is that it becomes a bit of that almost. It's very tangential to that should thing. Whereas if you create a big long list and you say these are the things that have to happen, and then you can't get through that, and then you end up moving some to the next day, and then it's just kind of like it's just like this big dark cloud like hanging over you, where it feels like it's anxiety building, right? When the goal, like, what's the goal here? The goal is to make sure that the really important stuff gets done, and it gives you focus during your day. And if you have such a long list of things, which I think most of us can easily make a list of all the things that we should get done, that we, in an ideal world, would all get done, but just that realistically, you're probably not going to get them all done. I think everybody listening to this can probably make that list, right? And then it becomes counterproductive. So I'm still working on this one personally. One idea I heard recently that I liked was, have 1 like absolutely critical thing that has to happen, 2 like high importance but not mission critical things, and then 3 like maintenance items. But they're like essential maintenance items. They're important things, but they're just keeping the machine running, keeping everything going well, going smoothly. And then you get those things done, and then you're like, cool, you've got your win. I know for me personally, I do try to keep it short, and I do try to keep it focused on like, these are the things that just, if this is the only stuff that I get done for the day, then it's a win. Because if you finish that in 3 hours and you're still planning on working for another 5 hours or whatever it is, like, you're going to find things to work on, right? But then those are bonus. Those are additional, like, yes, I got the win. And now look at this, I knocked out these extra wins. Whereas I think it's okay to roll over tasks from day to day. But if you keep doing that over and over, like, I've definitely gotten caught in the trap of this, where then it's suddenly like, oh man, this list is now like 15 things long, and some of these I wanted to get done 4 days ago, and then now how do you prioritize it? It loses its effect, I think. So I would keep it to what you you can get done, and if you get it done, then it's a win.
So I use an app called Things. It's a Mac app, and it's on the phone, and it's just basically a sort of a to-do list organizer thing. And there's a ton of stuff in Things. But when I think about your question here about like focus, like if we're thinking this in the evening, what am I going to focus on the next morning? I think back to, so I've learned so much from athletics. And, recently we were talking about skiing and ski lessons and getting better at skiing. But I think right when I was first in the mid 90s, when I was first learning about this world and about getting better and continually getting better, it was from Tony Robbins. We've talked about this before. Right around that time was when I was learning how to kayak, whitewater kayaking. And whitewater kayaking is one of those things where you have to, it's really sucks and it's dangerous until you get to a certain level of skill. So I determined I wanted to get to that certain level of skill, which a core skill is being able to roll your boat. So if you get flipped upside down, be able to roll it back up. It's a core skill. It's a self-rescue skill. And the problem is when you're trying to learn how to roll your kayak, you're upside down and your head's underwater and you can't breathe. And it just, when you can't breathe, everything comes really into focus and it just adds a lot of pressure to the situation. And there's three things that you have to do right when you roll the boat to roll it, to go from being upside down to being upright. And you can actually, if you can screw up one of them, you have to get 2 out of 3 things right. It took a bit to master, to really become a master of doing that. But what I noticed is that when I was upside down underwater, I could only focus on one thing. So I would focus on one skill, and people were teaching me, my trainer was teaching me how to do this, and I'd focus on that one skill over and over until I got that right, and then I could move on to the next skill. And I find the same thing with skiing. You got to worry about where your body is over your skis, where your torso's facing, where your weight is, which edge you're on, the timing, the terrain. There's so many things to think about, but I can generally think about one thing at a time. When I'm going there, my instructor says, do this one thing, leave everything else behind, focus on one thing. That's when I make a progress. And I think it's the same way when I'm thinking about work, about what I want to get done and about being creative. I can think about one thing. And if I try to think about a bunch of things, nothing's going to get done. So I've got that list. I can always go and find that list, and hopefully I keep it in priority order. So when I do the one thing, then I can look at the next thing. But for me, all of my results in my life, over all these years in business, has been down to my ability to focus. You need to be able to focus to get stuff done. So yeah, it's that whole deal about chasing too many rabbits versus chasing one rabbit.
Yeah. I mean, it's like when I was learning to drive, it was the same thing. You're focused on, like, you got to look in your rear view and check your mirrors and also keep the car going at the right speed and also make sure you're not swerving and like looking where you're going. And like, there's so many things when you're brand new, but eventually after a while, you get used to it, you grow into those skills. And now like checking your mirrors and knowing how to, control the car and, keep it at the same amount of speed, it all becomes kind of inherent. And then you can just focus on driving, right? Similar to what you're talking about with like running your business, a whole bunch of tasks that has to happen all at once, especially when we get to things like launches, where you have these moments in time where there's probably hundreds of things on your to-do list. And then there's times of your year where there's not so many things to do on your to-do list, right? How do you manage that?
Like, I'm going to go back to athletics, and it's this idea of sprinting and recovering. And for anyone who's done any training in any type of athletics, you know that where you get stronger is in the recovery. If you go and you lift weights, you don't get stronger when you're lifting weights. You get stronger in the next 24 hours. What you're doing is, when you're lifting, is you're breaking down your muscles. You're destroying muscle. So then in the next 2 days, it will grow back stronger. The recovery is incredibly important. So a lot of what we've been talking about is recovery. It's a daily recovery, but it's in bigger cycles. And there are going to be times in this business, I think in most businesses, where you'll be in a sprint situation where you're lifting, where things are breaking down because you're pushing so hard. That's just the nature of business, especially the business that we're in. In fact, I'll tell you what, Chris, next week, as we record this, I've got a week where I'm doing leading our mastermind group. We got the most amazing Plat Plus mastermind group. It's just unbelievable. This is going to be meeting number 43. We're 15 years in. We have people that have been in this group for 15 years with me. It's amazing. But anyways, Monday and Tuesday, I'm leading that group. Wednesday, we're actually going to have a fun day with that group. And then Thursday and Friday, we're doing a small workshop. Really small, tiny workshop to help people get their marketing figured out in a major way. So it's a very full week. My routine's going to go out the window. I got at 9 a.m. I have to be stepping on stage, and that day will last until 9 p.m. And I need a lot of sleep to recover from those days. They're amazing days. I love them, but I'm going to need a lot of sleep. So there's just no time there's not the time in there to do my normal morning routine or evening routine. It's going to be all jacked up. So, first I'm going to have to adapt that routine, tighten it up. So instead of, hours, I'm doing it in minutes. And then the real crux move, this is a super important thing. This is the thing that I think I screw up. So I'm assuming a lot of other people screw up, is then getting back into that habit the next week afterwards. I mean, it's like for those of you who do work out regularly, maybe you lift weights or you're doing Pilates or whatever, you've got some routine, you run and then you go on vacation and you get out of that routine. How quickly can you get back into the routine? So I think there's a piece of programming there where you have to really focus on reprogramming yourself after that sprint, and you can go into that recovery mode.
And one of the things that I hear you talking about is that in those sprints, in those moments, your routine maybe goes out the window. It's almost like the playoffs, for example, for a sports team is, you're going to be working harder and pushing harder than normal, and everything is going to be, upon that high intensity, urgent thing that's going on. But all the training and routine you did outside of the playoffs is what serves your ability to perform when maybe you don't have that daily routine. There's so much that you're doing outside of that to really be ready. Like the game is won in the gym, right? Before they ever get to the game. And so I think there's philosophy around like, should I have a daily routine when there's nothing? Yes, this is why we have the daily routines, because when we get to the point where we can't do it or we're so busy, it really does make a difference.
That is such a great point, because like I said, as we're recording this, it's going to be released in a couple of weeks. As we're recording this, today is Monday. And 1 week from today, Monday, I'm going to be on stage and I'm going to be in front of a lot of really smart people leading this amazing group. And I have to be on my game. And I can tell you right now that I'm so locked in on my morning routine. I'm so locked in on all the inner game stuff that it's going to be an incredible meeting, because I am going to be so present. And I'm going to be on fire when I lead that group, because I'm locked in right now on my inner game.
Hey, I think that was a great place to finish it up, guys. I'm going to say one more thing is thanks so much for all of our Dare to Launch family listening. And we hope this conversation inspires you to dare to launch. Hey, Launch family, one last thing before you go. If you haven't yet, go check out getyoulaunch.com. We actually have some really great free resources for anyone who's looking to get your business launched. So go to getyoulaunch.com, sign up with your email, and we'll send you out some free training. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next time.